one thing that I insist on doing is when someone is speaking, I won't interrupt them. Greetings, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fluency podcast. I am here today with my good friend Ramps. Welcome, Ramps. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you for asking. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Beyond Fluency podcast. You?
Yes,
What
absolutely.
are we chatting about today, man?
Today, we are going to be discussing the very interesting topic of flow. What do you understand about flow, Ramps?
Yeah, so when it comes to flow, what I understood from a scientific point of view, it's the moment in which you are deeply engrossed in whatever it is that you're doing, and that almost nothing else seems to exist. You get lost in this activity, in this world. You lose track of time, you know. Often we might hear people say in the zone. Maybe it's something we hear a lot in sport, football, basketball, when a player just seems to not be able to make any mistakes. Every decision they make is right there in the zone. That is what I understand as flow.
There's a great book on sports-related flow. Actually, it's called The Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler. He was a journalist who started following extreme sports specialists around in the 80s and 90s as the sport grew bigger and bigger. And he was really interested in the concept of the limitations that we set ourselves as humans. If you think back historically, one of the best examples is being able to run the 4-minute mile. The story of Roger Bannister, who was the Englishman who was the first person to break the 4-minute mile. And up until he did it, human thought was, no one could ever run faster than a 4-minute mile. And then when he did it, more and more people started to do it because the psychological barrier had been broken. The book is really interesting because this period of time where extreme sports became more and more popular, it was a constant breaking of records. And what he discovered from spending time with these people was the people that were constantly breaking these new boundaries they were in a state of flow constantly as they were doing it. We're talking about skiers, snowboarders, skaters, rock climbers, all these very highly focused adrenaline sports. All the people that were breaking the records attributed their success to being in a constant state of flow while they were making the attempts.
As I was listening to you, a quote did come to mind, because you were talking about the unlikelihood of people being able to attain these things, and not just as individuals, but collectively as society, what people believed at the time was and wasn't possible. And Nelson Mandela quote came to mind. It always seems impossible until it isn't. Something along the lines of that. I might actually have to look it up. Yeah. But I thought that was a very fitting quote for the role that extreme sport played in how people started to think. And it all started with Sir Roger Bannister, right?
Well, I mean, Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile is probably the most famous story of the psychological barriers that we put on things and someone breaking through that. I think there are many examples throughout history, but that's the first one that comes to mind for me because it was such a landmark within sports. But you look at the 100-meter sprint would be another example. At one point in history, no one believed anyone could run faster than 10 seconds, and then someone did, and then everyone started running faster than 10 seconds. Another example, no one thought you would be able to run a marathon in less than 2 hours, and that has also happened now. So the idea of what we're capable of is always very different once someone has shown everyone that it can be done. What experience do you have of flow, and is your experience based on sports or activities or learning?
I think the go-to would probably be sport, because I was
Okay.
very sporty growing up. I ran, I played football, tried to play cricket, and I say
Hmm.
tried. Yeah, so I was a very sporty child. So I think I've experienced flow a lot in running. I think especially in long distance running.
Right.
Because with long distance running, of course, every runner has a race, their own race that they run, and it takes time to sort of develop your race
Hmm.
and how you run.
How would you
Uh,
describe the feeling of flow when you're running?
Depending on the race, on how long the race was,
Hmm.
it would come in at different points in time. I think in the shorter distances, like 800 meters, there's enough time, at least for me, there was not enough time to get into the flow, because I need a little bit of time to warm up.
Okay. Yeah.
So with the long distances, so 1,500 meters, for example, the track, yeah,
Hmm.
maybe in the second or the third lap, I start to feel flow. And how I would describe it when running is when I'm no longer able to stop my legs myself. Like it's just I can't. My legs are in free flow state. They are in flow. They just keep going. And I look down and it just, and now it's just a matter of, can my chest keep up with my legs? And that's when
Right.
I know that I'm in flow. Yeah. What about you? I know you did, you were more artistic, right? Theater and so
Yeah.
on. Have
Yeah. I'm
you,
not a natural sportsman, but I no, I did. I ran the marathon. I ran the London Marathon once, and when
did you
you
finish?
start get, yeah, I finished. It took a while. I had an injury, but it's another story. Um, 7 hours. I was. They were packing the fences up by the time I finished, but I'd finished, so that was the important thing.
Yeah.
But in my training, actually, the long runs after 15 to 20 minutes of running and starting to get into the pace, into the breathing and stuff, everything seemed to relax, and the sensation was quite meditative in a lot of ways. It was effortless, I think, was a nice way of putting it, actually. And I've only really noticed that with one other thing that held my attention in that way. And when in my younger years, I used to DJ uh, quite a bit, just for fun mainly. It was an activity that allowed me to be creative and to be in the moment, almost meditative. And it was very easy, to start playing, and then the next thing you know, oh, it's been 2 hours. Like, where did that time go? Because you've just totally focused on what you're doing. Those would be my experiences of flow. But in terms of learning, and particularly learning languages, you've done a bit of research and listened to a couple of experts have a conversation about this. I'm just wondering, what firstly is the conversation happening around flow and learning, and secondly, what's your opinion about it?
Let's start firstly with where the conversation is right now in academia, I guess, and like the world of science. So, like many other ideas, there are two sides to it. So, the people who are very much advocates of flow, specifically in learning and its place in learning. And there are people who are like completely opposed to the idea and don't think that flow necessarily helps with learning, not at least in the manner that the other group thinks. Let's say we'll call group A the people who are for flow in learning, and B people who are saying not really. So group A believes so because it's the sense of being entirely engrossed. So I think group A, in when with what I've read and listened to, group A focuses on how flow, being the state of flow, is an intense level of focus, and it's from that point that they feel that there's a lot of space for flow in learning. Whereas the other group says, group B says, no, we don't think that there's much we can do, or much place for flow in learning, because when we're in a state of flow, we're not very conscious. You've sort of, as we said before, in the zone, have lost sense of everything and anything. And yes, there's a high sense of focus, but none of it is really intentional as such, not at least on a conscious level, anyway. So that's the sort of the two arguments on flow. So far, so good. What do you think so far? Any questions?
Yeah.
Anything?
No, I would tend to agree with that idea. I think especially with language learning,
group A or group B,
with the idea that there's no definite answer, right? There's a group A and a group B, and in a lot of ways both are correct.
Yeah.
So that's my personal view.
So you're going to sit on the fence basically then?
I don't think you can say specifically that language learning is helped by flow states. I think you could say there are certain elements of language learning that allow themselves to become flow-like, but then there are other elements that the conditions to create flow don't necessarily fall into the correct category. So I think it's a bit of both. Hello, beautiful people. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Every time you do that, it really helps us continue to grow. And hey, if you feel like sharing it with a friend who you think would be interested, that would also be very useful. Thanks.
So my opinion, because that was what the debate is.
That was my second question. Yeah.
My opinion is yes. Yes.
My opinion is yes.
Yes.
That's it. Yes. Yes to all.
So I think the group A is right as well as group B. So same as you. After all that, just saying the same as you. I agree.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I agree though. That both are correct is that I think flow is great in maybe helping people get out of their own headspace and now bringing it back to language. And something that we are experts on is that a lot of the times, a lot of the work that we're doing with the clients is helping them get out of their own way. So I think flow is helpful in language learning in that sense because it gives people proof that they can do it. Because I've heard, the joke sometimes with clients is like, Rams, I've realized something very funny is that anytime I'm out and having drinks with friends, after one beer, my level of fluency just kind of skyrockets. Okay. And at the same time, I'm able to use varied structures in terms of grammar, and my vocabulary is quite broad.
Right.
So, and I would say in those moments, those are moments of flow because of absolute
cause of alcohol.
Funny enough, cause of alcohol, absolute relaxation, right?
Yeah.
That's another state.
Alcohol helps you lose your inhibitions. So if you have inhibitions about communicating, they start to disappear.
So, and as you said it before, it's sort of like a meditative state. So I think flow comes into handy in learning because it gives, as I said, it's that proof that, well, I'm able to do it. I just need to try to find a way to be able to switch it on more frequently. And that's why I think I agree with group A. However, group B do have a leg to stand on because before you can get to flow, you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so that's why I think putting both opinions together and applying them to learning, and in our case, language learning, is useful. Of course, you cannot call upon flow, right? But you can now observe it. You can observe the moments where you're in flow, right? Because we talked about
you can actually create flow.
You can induce flow.
You can induce flow. Yes, it is entirely possible. You can create an environment where flow happens in a in an easier
I'm
way,
interested. I'm
certainly.
interested in finding out how. Um,
Well, the first thing
but
is to work without distraction. And I can give you an example of how I use this with all my clients. One thing that I insist on doing is when someone is speaking, I won't interrupt them. Often people are saying, "Oh, I want you to correct me," and I'm like, if I corrected you all the time, you would lose the flow of what you're saying. You would forget what you're saying. You would get self-conscious. It would just add to your insecurities. I will give you corrections, but we'll deal with those at the end of the session.
that's why I like online. Just to chip in here, I
Mm-hmm.
like online precisely of that, because clients say that, but please correct me, I say the exact same thing as you say. Like, don't
Yeah.
worry, the notes are there. I'm typing as you speak, and I'm listening, and then
Mm-hmm.
afterwards we'll have a look at it. So I'm struggling with replicating that in person interactions, because the minute you
Right.
start writing down on a notebook, people start sort of focusing the attention on whatever it is that you're doing, and you
Mm.
constantly have to remind them, don't worry, don't worry. So it breaks their flow,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know, have you got a trick for in person?
The only thing I would suggest, if you are experiencing that, as you know, if you're with a coach, you're with a teacher, you're in a job interview or whatever, try not to focus on it. Try to be kind to yourself and think the best. I think a nice phrase that I like to use with people, which you can kind of use in this situation, is sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And this is just a learning opportunity. We talk about this all the time, but making mistakes is a good thing because that's how you learn. So don't see the mistake as a negative. Don't see the person writing something down as a negative. Think of it as they're writing something to help me, not to criticize me. In terms of language learning ramps, what are your suggestions around flow, around which exercises finding flow can be easy and which are more difficult? So maybe don't have any expectations of finding it for
This,
those.
well, I mean, the finding flow one, you've just explained something now. So I think I'll leave that one to you,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't aware that you can induce flow. But
Mm.
what I can say about flow in terms of language learning is, observe it. Like how, in the example I gave before, how people already observe that when they're drinking and socializing, they're more at ease. It's like, observe the moments in which you're in flow, and be aware of those moments, and maybe try to understand what it is about those moments that help you get into that flow. It could be a person, like you said, it could be a drink, as we said earlier on as well. So that's how I would say observe the flow. And then this, actually, it's funny because I'm usually an advocate of do the things that you like doing, which is very
Mm-hmm.
much like a flowy thing, I would say. It just seems to correlate with flow, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Um, Whereas group B, the naysayers of flow correlate a little bit more with you, Mr. Frog Sandwich, right? So how you
Yeah.
can ease it in language learning of flow,
If it,
yeah, go for it.
Sorry to interrupt your flow there, Rabs. I was going to
It's
say
all right.
if you want to understand what the frog sandwich is, go back and watch our
Yeah,
previous episode on goal setting. You can
that
find a
was
link for that at the top of the screen.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Ding here.
Ding. Yeah, there you
All
go.
right. Yeah. uh, the second one is for language learning. You can lean into the naysayers of flow in learning in general, by going into the things that you're not so good at, right? And just breaking the ice. So yeah, that I would say you could use it in these two ways. Like I said, maybe you can add a little bit more because you believe that you know how it can be induced, but more than this, I can't think of anything.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
What do you think?
I think in practically getting into flow, it would be easier for doing reading exercises. If you're doing reading and listening, it would be easy to get into the flow of listening to someone speak and tell a story. If you were really enjoying a book, you could carry on reading and listening to it for a long period of time without noticing how long you've been doing it. The only issue with doing that is if you're trying to use it as an active learning exercise. If you're actively trying to learn from it, the longer you listen and read, the more language there will be to cover at the end of the exercise. I think flow probably lends itself much more to passive style exercises, because often with passive exercises there's no time limit, there's no restrictions, and there's no extra things to be doing at the end of it to consolidate your learning. And I think speaking is obviously the most natural choice for finding flow. And like you say, when you just need to have a glass of wine or a beer and be in more relaxed surroundings, and the brain takes over, and you're more confident and more able to continue in a conversation. And I think conversation is an excellent example of flow. How many times have you been out with someone and you've spent 3 or 4 hours just chatting with them in any language?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, we've been here for hours and it's just been so enjoyable. You don't even necessarily remember what you've talked about a lot of the time, but it was easy, and it was very much in the moment.
Yeah. I think you could use both. Use flow in your language learning, saying yes to flow by leaning into the things that you like that help you get into that state of flow, and then balancing it out with no, flow doesn't really work, and doing the things that you're uncomfortable doing. So you try to spend an equal amount of time, more or less, doing the things you're comfortable doing and the things you're uncomfortable doing. I can't believe this is coming from me, because you know how much of an advocate I am of starting with doing the things that you love doing. But having thought about it and having listened to the two sides of pro and against flow, I found that both sides actually brought useful information that, ironically, I think can be used actually in learning, even though the naysayers are saying, well, there isn't really much space for flow. Like, well, you're actually right. You identify what it is that is missing in flow, and I think what's missing in flow is conscious intention.
Right. Yeah,
Because
because it's a very much an unconscious state of being.
yeah, that's why I was asking you how about the inducing of flow, if it was possible.
Okay.
That's why it didn't occur to me that it might be possible. But I guess, I mean, I do that a lot with music. I listen to music, and if I find that this particular song gives me this type of energy, and I want to maintain that energy the entire day, I'll listen to songs that are it's very similar, whether it's in the tempo or whatever's
Right.
been said in the song, the message. Yeah.
Absolutely. One thing to do with music that you can do to achieve flow is put the same song on repeat again, because after
You don't have to
one,
tell
maybe two
me
listens, your
twice.
brain doesn't even register the song anymore. But it allows you to avoid other distractions from the world in order to focus on whatever it is that you want to focus on. So if you want to study, if you want to have focused study time, putting one song on, I would recommend something without words, something that has a particular tempo based on what you want to do, and just have it on repeat. I use this very often when I'm planning lessons or when I'm trying to get stuff done, and it helps get into that state of mind of focus, flow, concentration.
Always a pleasure, man. Time flies.
Absolutely, man. Yeah,
we
it
got
does.
into the state of flow, and the
Right?
next knew it was.
I know, and now we need to wrap it up. So, yeah, exactly. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. It's been a pleasure as always. Hope to see/hear from you next time. Please let us know in the comments below, what activities have you achieved a flow state in, and how do you think you could apply this to your language learning? I look forward to seeing your comments and your answers. That's goodbye from me.
And that's another goodbye from me as well. Enjoy the rest of your days and keep practicing.
All right. See you next time.